Welcome back, Bib 1001. Good to be seen by you one more time. We're moving into Exodus chapter 2, and you'll recall that at the end of Exodus 1, Pharaoh had given the order for every Hebrew baby boy to be thrown into the Nile at birth. And so now we move to chapter 2. I'm going to go ahead and read the first 10 verses, and then we'll talk about it. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." The child went and called the child's mother, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because, she said, "I drew him out of the water." Okay, well, let me go ahead and share the screen with you. And I put together a PowerPoint to help us think through what all we have going on in this story. And so let me go ahead and get that up to full screen. There we go. So this story is about Moses' mom, his sister, and Pharaoh's daughter, and obviously the birth of Moses. And our context, just as a reminder, our context is that the Hebrew baby boys are to be drowned in the Nile River by order of Pharaoh. And you can get back to that in Exodus 1. And so what we see, if we kind of work through the characters, is that Moses' mom is shrewd and determined. We read that she saw that her baby was a fine child. I don't know what mom doesn't see her baby as a fine child, but this mom saw that her baby was a fine child, a beautiful child, and she's determined to save him. And so out of that determination, she hides him for 3 months. We don't know how she hid him. Did she simply try to disguise his gender so that everybody thought she had a girl instead of a boy? Because I think everyone would know that she gave birth. So what did she do with the baby? Well, probably, I don't know, dressed him in pink, but somehow tried to make sure that no one knew that she had a baby boy. Then after 3 months, she couldn't hide him any longer, it says. And so here she decides to place him along the Nile River, place him in the Nile River along the banks of the Nile and the reeds that were growing there. And we got to remember he was supposed to be drowned in the Nile. So this is pretty ironic that she strategically places him in what was supposed to be his grave. Pretty amazing, pretty shrewd, pretty smart, that the one place that they would never look for him is the place where he's supposed to be, in the river. And so she hides him there. But you'll notice that she made a basket for him. And the word basket is literally the word ark. And we only find this word used in one other place in the Hebrew Bible, and that's in reference to the ark that Noah built. And so same Hebrew word only shows up for the basket size or the baby sized ark of Moses, and then the animal sized ark for Noah. The use of this word hints that this just might be a salvation story, that the last time we had an ark floating on the waters, God brought about new creation. And now we have another ark that's going to be floating on the waters of the Nile. And will God bring about a new creation? Will God bring about salvation? So it kind of slants us in that direction. And then another question that kind of comes up is Moses' mom, is she targeting Pharaoh's daughter, hoping and believing that Pharaoh's daughter will be compassionate whereas her father was so cruel, so tyrannical, so oppressive? Was she thinking that maybe, just maybe, that the only way to get her son saved was through the compassion of Pharaoh's daughter in the face of Pharaoh's oppression? So mom is shrewd, mom is determined, mom is smart, clever, um, making an ark, placing baby Moses in it, although he's not even named Moses at this point, and hiding him in the place that was supposed to be his grave. Next character, Moses' sister, and she is bold and she is bright. And she's doing what all big sisters do. She's keeping watch over her baby brother. He's been placed in the basket in the reeds along the bank of the Nile, and there's big sister watching over her baby brother, wanting to see what's going to happen, trying to be protective. That's just what big sisters do. And I'm sure I could get a testimony from one or two of you. She is bold to speak to Pharaoh's daughter about saving the child. She's watching, she sees a look in the eye of Pharaoh's daughter, and instead of being quiet or passive, she bursts onto the scene boldly. Do you want me to go get a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you? Quick thinking. Maybe she already had this plan, but quick thinking, bright, and sees the compassion in Pharaoh's daughter's eyes and immediately has a plan. And Pharaoh's daughter says, yeah, go get someone. And so what happens is mom gets her baby back. That Moses' mother gets her baby back, and she is actually going to get paid to nurse her own son. And that brings us to Pharaoh's daughter. And in a word, she is compassionate. And we see that she's ruled by compassion. She knowingly had pity on a Hebrew baby boy. It was recognized that this was a Hebrew baby, and instead of saying, flip the ark over and let the boy drown, she had compassion, and the compassion was more powerful than her father's order. And so she knowingly had pity, intentionally, purposely had pity upon this Hebrew baby boy that was under a death sentence from her father. And she gave orders to have mom paid to nourish and nurture the boy, to feed him, to raise him until he could be brought back to Pharaoh's daughter. So Moses' mom followed through on that. She received the boy back. She raised him as her, raised him, got paid to raise him. And then she took the boy back to Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter took him to be her son. And she's the one who named him Moses. And so Pharaoh's daughter, compassionate, ruled by this compassion. We see the irony in terms of mom being paid to nourish and to nurture her own son. And then mom returns the boy to Pharaoh's daughter, who raises him as her own son, and she names him. So, question, who is missing from this story? And I know someone's thinking, well, Moses' dad is missing. Well, yeah, he's gathering straw, he's making bricks. We wouldn't expect him to be there. He's in slavery, he's working and being worked ruthlessly. And someone else is thinking, well, Pharaoh's missing. Well, I mean, that's true. We don't read much about him, but he's busy running Egypt, and he's the one giving orders to drown all the Hebrew baby boys. And so who else is missing? And I know you're looking at the PowerPoint. God. God is never mentioned by name in this story. God is never given any credit. We read about Moses' mom, Moses' sister, Pharaoh's daughter, baby Moses, but nowhere in the story is God ever mentioned. God's not given any credit for anything in the story. God's not given credit for giving Moses' mom this plan, or for giving Moses' sister the courage and the quick wits to jump in. Not given, Pharaoh's daughter doesn't give God any credit. We don't read where the narrator says, and the Lord touched the heart of Pharaoh's daughter. So nowhere in the story is God mentioned. So is God present in this story? Remember, that's the big question of Exodus. Is God present? Well, on the one hand, we could say God must be present Man, how else do we explain such ironic reversals in the story? From being placed in the place that was to be his grave and yet drawn out from it and has life and given life. Pretty ironic to hide him in the place where he was supposed to be buried and then to have him basically brought forth from the tomb. For Moses' mom to give him back, give him up, should say it that way, to give him up and then receive him back and to be paid to nurse him. Absolutely amazing reversal, ironic. And then if we think about, to be saved by, of all people, to have compassion upon him, Pharaoh's own daughter. And so when we look at all this, we think, man, God must be in the story. But at the same time, we have to recognize that God's presence is a real question. Can you imagine if you were Moses' mom having to place your baby in a basket to be found by the daughter of the man who ordered the death of your baby? I mean, would it feel like God was with you that day? Would it feel like God was with you as you have to relinquish your child into along the riverbanks, not knowing what might grab him, who might get him, and what might happen? And then imagine having to give that boy up again to Pharaoh's daughter to have him raised in the palace. Pretty tough. And you'd wonder, God, where are you in all this? And it'd be pretty easy to feel like you're God forsaken instead of God being with you. So the question is a real question. Is God present? Is God keeping his promise of presence that he made to Abraham way back there in Genesis? Well, I'm working from the assumption that God is present in the story. But then that raises another question. Why leave God out of the story? If God's active and in it, why leave him out? Why not mention him? And I think sometimes that's just how life is. And the narrator is recognizing that we can only recognize that God has been with us when we are far enough along to look back with greater perspective. In the moment, may not seem like God is right there. But as we get further along and we look back, then all of a sudden we become aware that, wow, God was present, has been with us through the story. So that may be partly why God is left out of the story, simply because life is very much like that. We also see God working through these three women to deliver the deliverer. And I can't help but wonder, did they know God was working through them? Did they have some kind of sense that God was at work through them to deliver, to save Moses, and that he was going to be special, that God was going to use him to bring salvation to their people? So did they know God was working through them? Or can God work through people without them even realizing that God was working through them? That, I think, is a really interesting question. Can God work through people without the people themselves even realizing that God was at work through them? Like Pharaoh's daughter, did she know that God had touched her heart to show compassion to this baby? She may have never figured that out. But I think one of the things that's being communicated is that God is at work through people, whether they acknowledge it or not, to get his will done. And so this is something that we see in biblical narrative and in life, that God is always at work, whether we can identify God or not. And that the creation, redemption, salvation story, history, it's ultimately God's story. It's ultimately an account of God at work to redeem and to save fallen humanity, fallen creation. So maybe that's why leaving God out of the story makes sense. That's a pretty good reflection of how life often is. We don't know God's in the story until we get far enough along to see perspective, to get a new perspective on things. And also just expressing the truth that God is at work in and through people, whether we realize it or not. And so that's this one, and really powerful to begin to think about. And find my cursor so I can get up here and stop the screen share. Let's see. Here we go. So Exodus 2, 1 to 10, one of my favorite passages, one of my favorite birth stories. Just the powerful reversals, ironic reversals that we see that testify that, yeah, we may not always know it, but God is at work to accomplish his good and saving purposes. Well, we're going to move into chapter 3. Thanks for watching this one, and we'll keep on moving through Exodus. Good stuff. And boy, it's hard to see that cursor out here. All right. You guys have a great rest of the day, and I look forward to being seen by you on the next video.